Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about India's performance at the Tokyo Paralympics. We also take a quick look at the farmers' protest in Muzaffarnagar. But first, we talk about Pakistan's ISI chief visiting Kabul. On Saturday, Pakistan sent Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, the head of ISI, that is the Inter-Services Intelligence, to Kabul. Hamid's arrival in Kabul comes at a time when the Taliban has been in the middle of forming its government and deciding who all would occupy positions of power. Now, during Hamid's visit, he even ended up answering questions from those in the media. This had people talking about what Pakistan was trying to signal through this. In this segment, Indian Express's associate editor Shubhajit Roy, who reports on matters of foreign affairs for the newspaper, joins us to talk about this. So Shubhajit, the ISI chief, was spotted in Kabul last week, and that has been making a lot of news, especially considering he has been visiting Kabul at a time when the Taliban is still in the process of forming its government. So firstly, what significance does him being there have, considering, he is the head of Pakistan's spy agency rather than, just another diplomat or official?
Yeah, Shashank, you're right that Pakistan's ISI chief, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, he was spotted in Kabul. Picture of him having tea with the Pakistan's ambassador to Afghanistan, Mansoor Ahmad Khan. It essentially shows how the Pakistan army and the Pakistan military is playing an active role in the formation of the government and not Pakistan's civilian government. So of all the players who are involved in the regional stakeholders, obviously Pakistan's ISI, they are the ones who are responsible for Taliban's rise and again resurgence. And of course, the various terrorist groups which are now part of the Taliban or aligned to the Taliban, which includes the Haqqani network, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Jaish-e-Mohammed. So this essentially shows how active the Pakistan army and especially Pakistan's intelligence agency or the spy agency is involved in the current scenario, current situation in Afghanistan, which essentially involves the formation of the governance structure in Afghanistan.
And there is also this video that has been floating around of him talking to this reporter from the British television network Channel 4. And in this video, he is saying that, don't worry, everything will be okay. And he appeared to be almost cheerful when he said that. Should we read too much into this? I mean, do we see this as the ISI signaling something in particular?
So he was in the Serena Hotel, which is the most protected hotel, where I was staying in Kabul when I was reporting from there. And he came across some of the reporters who are also possibly staying in the hotel. And the reporter essentially accosted him and the Pakistani delegation by asking them simple question about what are you here for? So the Pakistan ambassador, Mansoor Ahmad Khan, he said for something like, we are here for the security and stability of Afghanistan, or peace and security in Afghanistan. And then Faiz Hamid, who is the ISI chief, he said, it's okay, everything will be fine. Something to that effect.
What do you hope is going to happen now in Afghanistan? What is your best hope?
I have just landed and
we are working for peace and stability in Afghanistan.
Don't worry, everything will be okay.
So essentially, as we all know, that the ISI chief's visit is always kept under the radar. It's never announced or not made public. And these are visits, usually you don't see pictures floating around in the media. So the fact that he was photographed, he allowed himself to be photographed rather, and allowed himself to come face to face with a journalist, even if it's not a proper one-on-one interview or even an interaction with the media. The fact that he chose to answer some of the questions, it shows that Pakistan's ISI wants to project this image that they are grandfathering this particular government in Afghanistan and this regime in Afghanistan. So this is part of possibly a psyops being adopted by Rawalpindi and not Islamabad. So you don't see a Pakistan foreign minister or the Pakistan civilian government representative or in there. Although the Pakistan ambassador is there, but he is essentially accompanying the Pakistan's ISI chief, who is considered the most powerful man in Pakistan by virtue of his position. So essentially, that's what it means, that Pakistan not only is playing a role, but also wants to convey to the world, to the international community, that they are the ones who are calling the shots.
And what do we know about what ISI wants when it comes to the government forming in Afghanistan?
Well, it's clear that ISI wants more of its people. Even within Taliban, those who swear allegiance and loyalty to Pakistan and Pakistan's ISI, Pakistan's military. So it's clear that the Taliban has several factions. As we know, that Taliban is not a monolithic organization. It has several factions, several groups. So there is a group which is the Doha group, the group which has been negotiating with international interlocutors, US and others. And even they had a meeting with the Indian ambassador last week. So that Doha group is headed by Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. So they are the ones who are seen as people who are been talking to the international community. So they are seen as people who want a regime or a governance structure which is much more globally acceptable. Whereas the Haqqani network is seen as a group which is a terrorist group, which is responsible for terror attacks in Afghanistan. And also they have attacked Indian interests, Indian embassy in 2008. So the Indian government is very wary of these terror groups, like the Haqqani network. Now, Pakistan's ISI essentially wants Haqqani network to grab some of the most influential positions in the council, also as governors of major provinces, major cities. They should be in control of those. So essentially, they want to handpick people who are loyal, that is the Haqqani network, and they want the Baradar group should be given a minimal role or a lesser role as compared to the Haqqani network. So that is one of the divides we are seeing emerging within the groups, within the factions in Taliban. So that has been the assessment in New Delhi, that possibly because all these groups are jockeying for powerful positions, so the Pakistan's ISI chief, he is making this visit to smoothen this process and have more of their guys in the team, in the council, or in the governor positions across the country, especially in the major centers, major provinces. And that's what is the ISI chief is visiting Kabul for.
And if they are able to do that, let's say if people within the Haqqani group are able to put themselves in positions of power in Afghanistan, how does it affect what India wants out of the region?
Well, it obviously is contrary to India's interests. If Haqqani network, because it has a history of attacking, targeting Indian embassy and Indian interests, Indian people, and they are seen as the protege of the Pakistan's ISI. So essentially, the signal that will go out is that India is not welcome, because that's what Pakistan wants. India should not be there in Afghanistan. So after 20 years of intense involvement, $3 billion of investments in projects, in aid, it will find it difficult to have its presence. Now, there's another layer to that is also there, that if the Pakistan's ISI is also able to keep, say, former leaders of Afghan government, for example, former President Hamid Karzai, or former peace negotiator and CEO Abdullah, they want to keep them away from the government of the Taliban's governing structure, Afghanistan's new governing structure. So that will again be seen as a setback to India's interests. Then from global perspective and also from India's perspective, if the new governance structure does not have representation from different communities, for example, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras. Also, the sectarian divide has to be bridged, has to be represented. So there should be some Shias, apart from Sunni leaders, also in the governance structure. And last but not the least, women representatives in the government, in the powerful positions, in the governing structure. So all these will be benchmarks to see how representative, how inclusive Taliban's governing structure comes about to be. And if the Taliban-led governing structure in Afghanistan, in Kabul, wants international legitimacy, wants international acceptability, these are some of the things that they will be measured on, they will be benchmarked on. So that is the space where one has to see how accommodative the new Taliban, so-called the Taliban 2.0, that many people are talking about, and they are making those statements themselves, whether they live by those commitments, because that is what will really differentiate themselves from the Taliban of 1996.
And Shubhajit, India had first made contact with the Taliban on the 31st of August. And during this, India had raised concerns about things like the safety and security of Indians in Afghanistan and the safety of Afghan nationals who have worked with India. Plus, India had said that no terror group should be allowed to operate from the territory of Afghanistan. And now on Saturday, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla spoke to the media in the US about this contact. Could you talk about what stood out for you about what Shringla said to the reporters there?
Yeah, so as we reported in the Indian Express about Harshvardhan Shringla, the topmost diplomat in the Indian government, he went to the US, and this statement was made days after, as you rightly pointed out, India made public its first official contact with the Taliban, which was made in Doha by the Indian ambassador in Doha in Qatar, Mr. Deepak Mittal. He met the deputy leader of the political office of the Taliban in Doha, Mr. Sher Mohammad Abbas Stanekzai. So in that meeting, the Indian ambassador had raised its concerns with Stanekzai, and the readout statement that came out from the Indian government, the Ministry of External Affairs, it said that Stanekzai had said that he will positively address these concerns. Now, days after that, we saw Shringla talking to the media in Washington, D.C. after his meeting with US officials. And he said that you have to see whether the assurances that have been made publicly are actually maintained on the ground. And he made a very, very interesting comment that the engagement with the Taliban has been limited. And it's not that India and Taliban have had a robust conversation, but whatever conversation they've had so far, the Taliban seem to indicate that they will be reasonable in the way they handle the Indian concerns. So I think that's a very significant statement that stood out for me, that struck me as very important, because India's topmost diplomat saying that Taliban has indicated that they will be reasonable in the way they handle India's concerns. I think from India's perspective, this is the highest level statement that's been made on this issue, especially days after Taliban's, in a sense, assurance to the Indian government. So from India's security perspective, this is first a realization or recognition of Taliban as a responsible, legitimate state actor. And so their assurance is being taken seriously. But obviously, he also pointed out it has to be seen how it is implemented on the ground.
And next we talk about the Paralympics. The Tokyo Paralympics, which ended yesterday, turned out to be historic for India. And this is because this year, India won the highest number of medals it ever has during the Games. A total of 19, which included 5 golds, 8 silvers and 6 bronze. In this segment, we talk to Shahid Judge, who has been reporting on the Games for the Indian Express, about the reason behind these wins and the Paralympians that have stood out during these Games. So Shahid, this year India won a total of 19 medals at the Paralympics. I mean, In the past, we have never won these many medals. In fact, in 2016 at Rio, we had won just 4. So what is the reason behind this kind of a medal haul this time?
Shashank, there are lots of answers to that actually, but the main one is just there's been a lot of collaboration this time, be it from the government, be it from private enterprises, and also there's been a lot of awareness as well. So, for example, Vinod Kumar, I think he was the one who had said that when Deepa Malik won her medal in Rio, he realized that, oh, there is such a thing as Paralympics and there is such a thing that people like him can get into. We take the word awareness for granted now. It's become such a cliche, but it holds true in such a kind of scenario. And of course, the government funding has also increased and it's gone in the right places, going into the right avenues, and athletes have taken good advantage of it and they've showed that it was worth it.
Yeah, and from these right moves have emerged a lot of champions and a lot of stories. So let's talk about a few of them. I mean, one of the people that have made a lot of noise this time is Sumit Antal, the 23-year-old javelin thrower from Sonipat in Haryana, who won the gold in the F64 category. He threw the spear to a 68.55 meters, and in the process of doing that, he broke his own record 5 times. How big of a deal was his win?
I think a pretty big deal. I mean, just looking at that particular day and that particular event in itself. I mean, I remember we were just keeping a track on WhatsApp. People were updating us, this has happened, this has happened. Then it was like, okay, second throw, he's broken the world record. Okay, everybody started writing their stories. And then third throw, he's broken another world record. Okay, chalo, let's update that. And then he's broken another world record. It was a happy kind of crazy, but it was still crazy in itself. But the other thing is that there was probably mainly because of what Neeraj Chopra did. It's almost a month back now. What he did, there was this kind of a romanticized feeling that we have towards the javelin throw event now. Granted, I mean, even before Neeraj, we had Devendra Jajjaria who had won 2 back-to-back gold medals in the javelin throw event in the Paralympics. But Neeraj's achievement kind of opened things up. And just a month later, another 23-year-old like Neeraj, I mean, those similarities just started rattling all the way through the narrative over there. And then this boy goes on to break world record after world record and goes on to win the gold medal. So, I mean, it just increased that whole fascination towards the javelin throw event and that gold medal association with this particular event. For so many years, the 10-meter air rifle men's event in shooting has been dubbed like Abhinav Bindra event. Over here now, this has become like the India's event. Hum log javelin mein jeete rahenge, and this breaking world records and 2 back-to-back gold medals in a month. I mean, that's just quite a big achievement. Yeah. It has to be a big achievement.
Okay, so now the other big story that has come out this time is that of the 19-year-old Avni Lekhara, the rifle shooter from Rajasthan. She won the gold medal in the 10-meter air rifle standing event as well as a bronze in the 50-meter air rifle standing event. So could you talk a bit about her win and what her journey has been like?
Yeah, I mean, see, when we were talking about the Olympics, of course, there was a lot of hype, and the likes of Saurabh Chaudhary, Manu Bhaker and all, they were all quite favorites to win and all that. But this was another 19-year-old who came out and actually did what nobody expected her to do. I mean, she came out and won gold. So that whole thing about, oh, this is your first Olympics and the nerves and all that. I mean, obviously it is a high pressure game, but this girl, she really handled it well. And it's not like she didn't face those nerves at all. Like Suma Shirur, her coach, was talking about how she had a very slow start. She raised her hand to call for the coach, and the coach, which is allowed, it's perfectly well in the rules. So the coach came in and just told her, like, Avni, this is nothing. You've been through so much in your life. And it's true. She met with an accident when she was 11 at that time and paralyzed waist below. I mean, that's a massive thing for anybody to go through. And Suma just saying, you've come through that. This is really easy. Yeah? You just need to show that little spark of courage. This is a moment to be courageous. And then this girl kind of, I don't know, something clicked in her mind and she's like, yeah, like, why not? Let's go for it. And she did. And here you go. She won the gold. And then a few days later, she's won a bronze event again. And the bronze in the 50-meter 3 position, that's considered like the marathon of shooting events. You need a lot of strength, a lot of stamina. And for athletes like these who are wheelchair bound, like Suma was just briefly explained it, like a person like you and I mean, if we want to get into any kind of sport, I mean, we have to work on our stamina. So that means a lot of running, jogging, cycling, just to get that whole cardiovascular base built, stamina badhane ke liye. But how do you do that with somebody who's wheelchair bound? So the exercises are much more different and much more intensive. And I mean, it takes a lot just to get that. And this girl at 19, like she's not even a proper senior. She's not been in the seniors team for ages. She's just about starting and she's already come up with this. So you can just imagine how things are going to play up for her once she does get that physical strength on board as well.
Okay, so from Lekhara, we move on to Bhavina Bhen Patel, who is the 34-year-old tennis player from Gujarat. She won a historic silver medal this time. She lost to Zhao Ying, who is a 2-time gold medalist. But even just to reach the final, she had to defeat a Chinese player, which is a big deal. So could you talk about her win and what stood out for you in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that would stand out for anybody, I mean, you haven't watched the match, but you just look at the score sheets and everything, and you will notice that in the semi-final, she beat a Chinese player. And that's no easy thing at all, especially in table tennis. The Chinese have this remarkable grasp of practically each and every medal. It's actually big news when a Chinese player loses a match, let alone a medal match. And she beat the Rio silver medalist, the world number 3, to go into the final. So this time the rules had changed in table tennis. Earlier you would have the bronze medal playoff match. So it's kind of a given. ठीक है, semi-final पहुंच के bronze medal secure हो गया. This is what happened this time. Earlier there would be a playoff. But Bhavina didn't have that mindset. Like she wanted to actually win that semi-final and go ahead to the final. She wasn't just settling for the bronze that way. Like, theek hai, the excuses would have been ready-made. Okay, I was playing against the world number 3. I was playing against a Chinese player. I couldn't win the semi-final. Bronze medal to leke aayi. That didn't do it for her. She actually went out, troubled that Chinese player, and then she went into the final. Of course, in the final, she was playing the world number 1, who is a big legend in the sport as well, a multiple-time Olympic gold medalist. So, fair enough, losing to that kind of player, that kind of caliber is fine. There's still something to be proud of in the way she's reached that far as well. And I mean, she's still beaten big players to get there. She's beaten practically every single person. In fact, she played at the Paralympics, was ranked higher than she was. Apart from this, the world number 1, she beat everybody just to get that far. And that's massively commendable. And becoming the first ever table tennis player in the Olympics or the Paralympics to win a medal. That's quite a big feat.
Okay, and the last player we talk about, even though there are many more, is Pramod Bhagat, who is a badminton player hailing from Bihar. And badminton was introduced for the first time at the Paralympics this year, and he won a gold medal in the men's single SL3 event. So what is the significance of his win and what led to, him winning the medal?
Yeah, actually, Pramod, he's already got a really big CV behind him. He's a 4-time world champion, a gold medalist, and he is the current world champion as well in singles and doubles. This is the first time badminton was making an appearance at the Olympics. So he had practically won all the big medals that was there to be won in para badminton before this. This, of course, is the biggest medal, and he was the favorite to go out and get it, given that he has won all these big other titles, and he went and did that. I mean, obviously, it wasn't an easy thing because the World Championship he won in 2019, after that the lockdown came on, and that was a tumultuous kind of episode for every single athlete, probably everywhere in the world. But he was talking about how they were at the academy in Lucknow, and they just continued doing what they were doing there. Okay, you were not allowed inside, so they were just playing outside. Basically what we do, हम लोग गली में खेलते हैं or within our society just put a makeshift net and just like hit the shuttle against each other. That's essentially what these guys were doing out in the open. So just to keep their body fit as much as possible. And this shows one side of the dedication that these guys have to go through. The other side, I mean, no matter how hard these guys try to explain, we'll never really understand. And this guy's 33 years old. He's not exactly a young guy, but he's a veteran. He's got so much experience behind him. And this was one medal that he would have probably been kicking himself if he didn't win it. And lucky for us, he didn't really reach that stage. He's gone on and won it.
And Shahid, this great medal haul by India has once again started a conversation about, how things really do need to change when it comes to the kind of facilities and the kind of support Paralympians get, but also just the kind of support disabled people should get. You have been speaking to some of these Paralympians. What are the kind of things that they have been saying about this?
I was speaking to Bhavina recently and she kept using the word huck quite often. This huck to describe what kind of life para-athletes deserve to be leading, and not just para-athletes, but just people who have impairments but are not athletes. I mean, why should they be subjected to anything less than anybody else? And she's saying that essentially everybody just wants the right to live, the right to be treated with respect. And it shouldn't be somebody needing to win a silver medal or a gold medal to be earning that respect. It should be coming automatically. That's the kind of society that we need to be living in. That's the kind of society we need to aspire to be in. So that was the kind of thing she was talking about. And she's saying that obviously the awareness has made a big difference. People have become more aware about people like Bhavina and their existence. And she's saying those days where people will say, oh, abhi kya karenge? Abhi inka zindagi khatam ho gaya. Those days, unfortunately, not yet long gone. Of course, there are still pockets within the country where these things still exist, where this kind of mindset still exists. It's not as prominent as it was earlier, but it's still there. So those are the things that have to change. But the awareness has increased over these years, and it's increased the talent pool. So I was talking to somebody recently and they just gave an example. They said in the Para Athletics National Championship in 2015, there were a ballpark figure about 700 people who had come to participate. And in 2019, there were 1,800 people who had come to participate. So that's more than twice. And the number of people who had come before Rio and versus who have come now. So this talks about the awareness, how it's reached these other places where people know that this is one thing that they can do, one thing that they can compete. And, just to show that they belong in this society, which they do. But unfortunately, we haven't reached that stage where it's a given. They still have to fight for their place, and hopefully Tokyo will just show that they do belong here. They belonged here all along. It's just that we didn't realize it before.
And next we talk about the farmers' protests. Yesterday, thousands of farmers gathered at the Kisan Mahapanchayat in Muzaffarnagar in UP. The farmers, while protesting, slammed the government by saying that it is selling the government to corporates and said that they are fighting to save the nation. The event was organized by the Samyukt Kisan Morcha at the government inter-college ground in Muzaffarnagar in protest against the centre's 3 controversial farm laws. The Samyukt Kisan Morcha also issued the call for a Bharat Bandh on the 27th of September to press for their demands. During the rally, Bharatiya Kisan Union national spokesperson Rakesh Tikait said, quote, "These meetings will be held across the country. We have to stop the country from getting sold. Farmers should be saved. The country should be saved. Business, employees and youth should be saved. This is the aim of the rally." Unquote. Tikait, while addressing the farmers, also said that the centre ended the talks on January 22nd and did not even express grief over the deaths of more than 600 farmers that have died protesting so far. Farmers largely from Punjab, Haryana and UP have been protesting against the government farm laws for over 9 months now. They are demanding that the centre should repeal the new laws because they feel the laws will leave them at the mercy of big private players and that they would eventually be forced to sell crops at a much lower cost. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.